Part 3 of turning this absolute disaster into our dream garage. In part 2, we left off with me completing this installation of a really cool elevated storage system to get all my crap off the floor. And then I got really sick and disappeared for 3 weeks. So this is where we left off. When I was finally able to get back to work, I decided I was going to tackle this area of all my DIY supplies. I started out by cleaning it all out. I decided I was going to turn the existing rickety shelves into a floor-to-ceiling cabinet. I started off with a couple of very long pieces of plywood that were the same height as my cabinets that are already hung and the same depth as my shelves. I also got shorter pieces that were the same depth that go across the center and the top to create a box. After that, I just laid it out on the floor and screwed together the top portion. I also decided I wanted to add one shelf right below the top shelf and then have a larger space between the middle and the top of the shelving unit underneath. Here you can see I'm using a spacer block so that I can get the exact same size on each side for my shelf. This thing was ridiculously tall. I could barely lift it up, let alone move it around. I definitely struggled. The first thing I did was to move it all in place and get it around the shelving unit so I would know exactly where to put the board that is going to go right on top of the shelving unit. And then I went ahead and screwed that in place. After I did this, though, I realized that I need to take it back off the wall because I don't have any sort of braces behind my unit in order to screw it into the stud. So then I went ahead and removed it from the wall, and then I added 2 braces, one to the top, one to the middle, and then tried to wriggle it back in place. You could see me kicking it. After that, I secured the whole cabinet to the wall by screwing it into the studs. I also dropped the whole stupid thing on my finger, which made it turn purple, so that was fun. And then from there, I needed to figure out how to deal with the weird gap in the middle because both pieces of wood were bowed opposite of each other. I ended up gluing, clamping, and then screwing the wood together both from the top and from the bottom. Next up, I made some face frame pieces by ripping down some 1x3s, and then I installed those using wood glue and brad nails. This is always the most satisfying part, in my opinion. Once that was finished, I was able to turn my attention to making the cabinet doors. I started out by cutting down all my wood pieces into the rails and then into the stiles. Then I ran them all on the table saw to make grooves on the sides of each one, plus the ends of the rails. Next, I cut the plywood panels for my center pieces down, and then I dry fit it all together to make sure everything fit snugly like a puzzle. After I got everything cut and pieced together for all 4 cabinet doors, then it was time to glue everything together. This was kind of tricky and messy, and I got glue absolutely everywhere, but it came together in the end. The last step before I clamp everything together was to cut down these little tiny pieces of the plywood that I use for the center panels and shove them in these little holes that are created on the end. This is called the loose tenon method for creating cabinet doors. It's something new I learned. After that, I clamped them up to let the glue dry, and then I went back into the garage and started working on sanding and caulking and all the finish work that I needed to for my cabinet carcass. I also got this broken door and took it outside and glued that back together as well. Up next, I'm turning my attention to these cabinets. I'm getting everything sanded. I've got to attach the lowers to the wall. I need to make a countertop, and then everything is going to get a coat of paint. Stay tuned and hit that follow button so you can see what comes next.